playing the violin for even a year, you've probably run into at least a little bit of frustration with your fourth finger. But what if I told you that it doesn't have to be such a dreaded digit? I'm Tobiah Murphy, and this is Murphy Music Academy. And of course, if you are looking for more personalized help with your fourth finger woes or any other aspect of violin playing or viola playing that you might be struggling with, then shoot an email to admin@murphymusicacademy.org. We will set you up with one of our highly qualified Murphy Music Academy private teachers, and the first lesson is free. The problems with the pinky, or the fourth finger, as we violinists call it, are seemingly quite obvious. It's the smallest finger, the thinnest finger, the weakest finger, and so often our approach to improving our technique with the fourth finger is one of just brute force. We think if we can get the fourth finger strong enough, then we won't have to worry about it anymore. And if that has been your approach, you're probably still working on it that way because it's not the best approach. Now, there is some truth to where you do need to get the fourth finger stronger, and we are going to talk about that today. But most of the problems with the fourth finger actually have to do with what's up here. And so for the first thing I want to talk about with the fourth finger and how to improve your technique with it is, well, try not to treat it any differently than your other fingers. Now, for those of you wondering what I mean, you probably aren't paying much attention to what you're doing when you're playing, because most of you, if you're struggling with your fourth finger, and I've seen this many times with many students, essentially rearrange everything from their hand all the way down to what they're doing with their bow arm every time they have to play the fourth finger. There's an exercise I like to do with a lot of my students, mostly for bowing, but it does involve some stuff with the left hand, and it's Subject Opus 2, the first part. It starts out with this little lick. When a student gets to the fourth finger, suddenly everything changes the moment that finger comes into view. Once they think they have to use their fourth finger, and this is done just kind of instinctively because I have to point it out to them, they immediately change the position of the hand, they immediately change what the bow is doing, they often raise their shoulders, which is always a bad thing to do. Everything changes because they are already mentally apprehensive about the fourth finger. And one of the most important things you can do if you want to improve your fourth finger technique is try to convince yourself not to react to having to play the fourth finger. Try to treat the fourth finger, especially as far as the bow arm is concerned, exactly how you would treat the other fingers. Like many things on this channel, this seems so obvious, yet I know that many of you are struggling with this and maybe you didn't even realize it. So I encourage you, maybe stop the video, go play something and see if you act a little bit different, even if it's just a feeling in here whenever you're about to play the fourth finger, especially if you're playing the fourth finger in a melodic passage. Maybe not always when you're playing something fast and the fourth finger can kind of touch and go, but most often for these slower passages where the fourth finger just has to make its entrance, you're probably doing more than just this. And if your fourth finger is doing more than this and you are reacting to the fourth finger with any other part of the body differently than you would with the other fingers, then that is something that you need to address immediately. However, it's not always a psychological issue. Sometimes the problem we have with our fourth finger has to do with the way that our hand is set up. And that brings us to our second point, which is always, always, always have the fourth finger hovering over the strings, no matter what finger you're playing on. One of the worst things that I see students do, and I try to fix immediately, is the fourth finger that is hanging out down here. First off, this is a sign that you are squeezing the hand this way, and that's how you're bringing the fingers to the strings. Not only is this just a bad thing generally, but since this is a video about the fourth finger, it always causes the fourth finger to curl up down here, which is a big problem when you actually need to use it. Another thing that happens, which isn't quite so bad, but still bad, is where the fourth finger curls up back here. This is very common when people go from playing with the fourth finger to playing with lower fingers. They often tend to curl up the fourth finger and sometimes the third finger and have them hanging out back here, which they then have to shoot out this way, which not only produces, a lot of inaccuracy because it's much easier to hit the target from here than from here, but it also engenders a lot of insecurity in playing with the fourth finger. One thing that can help fix this is just to change the way you think about how the fingers are pressing down the strings. And I talked about this in another video called Fix Your Left Hand in 1 Minute, but the way you want to think about this is instead of having the fingers close this way to press the strings down, what you want is to always think of your fingers moving to your thumb. Right? As you see here, my hand stays quite open instead of closed. No matter what finger I'm using to touch the thumb, they all stay in this shape, which is the same shape that you want when you're playing the violin. Now, when it comes to the thumb position, I've talked about this in other videos too, you don't always have to have the thumb here, and obviously you can't bring the thumb to all the fingers. So no matter where you are comfortable placing the thumb on the neck of the violin, you want to imagine the entire neck of the violin as being a giant extension of your thumb, and then you just tap the fingers to that. And this will also help keep the fourth finger more or less hovering over the strings at all times, which will greatly increase the security and accuracy of your fourth finger. But even with this approach to the left hand technique, your fourth finger probably won't automatically just start hovering over the strings. So no matter what you're doing with your left hand, just make a concentrated effort to keep your fourth finger in this position at all times. Now, the third thing I want to talk about is something that might seem a little bit more obvious, and that is increasing the strength and flexibility of the fourth finger. Now, strength training of the fourth finger can take many different forms, but to start with, I would like to show you what I think is most important in terms of fourth finger strength, and that is the ability to keep the fourth finger in this broad, curved shape, no matter how hard you are pressing on the strings. If you've watched my other videos, you know I'm not a fan of pressing the strings down that hard. You don't actually need to press down the strings that hard to get a good sound. However, that doesn't mean that you should not be able to, and this is especially true of the fourth finger. And it's even more important that the fourth finger, as I said before, can retain this shape. You shouldn't have to do this with the fourth finger and get this high curve in order to maintain the shape of the fourth finger and not have the, it's actually hard to do because I've trained it so much, maybe I'm going to use my other hand, and not have the middle knuckle collapse, as I'm sure many of you have experienced. Now, while it is possible to play, and to even play well, with a collapsed middle knuckle on the fourth finger, and I played like this for many years when I was younger, it adds an extra motion into the finger, and also, in my opinion, a bit of instability and stiffness to the finger that is not conducive to the best technique. So one of the things I work with my students is to make sure that no matter how hard they're pressing down, that does not happen. They're able to maintain this nice curved shape. So the first place that you want to start with this is actually without the violin. You want to do what I call the pinky push-up, where you put the tip of your pinky on the tip of your thumb, and then you start to squeeze down this way, and you're trying to focus on maintaining the shape. Part of that is going to be a mind-muscle connection, part of that is going to be strength, and the other part of this, which people don't think about, is making sure that the motion of the finger is going straight down. Very often what you see when people have the knuckle collapsing is that they're actually pulling, almost like hooking the finger and pulling on it this way. You'll often see when people do have that happen, they're actually pulling that way instead of just having the energy go straight into the string. And that's another thing that is going to affect your strength and also your fourth finger technique. But the first thing you want to do is just get into this shape, slowly press down, and then the moment that you see, and I'm going to use my other hand because it'll actually happen, the moment you see that happen, that's where you stop and you restart and you try to squeeze again, and be very careful and try to get right up to the point before this happens, and then just hold it there. And you'll do this for several days, maybe for a couple weeks, as the finger learns how to press downward, learns how to keep its shape, and the strength increases in the pinky. Once you're able to do that, then the next thing is to do it on the violin as well. So just get the finger here. And then what you're going to do is slowly press the string down. Sometimes people can barely press the string down before that happens because, as we talked about before, they're actually tending to pull rather than just push straight down. But you're going to just press a little bit very slowly. And the moment that you feel that happening, then you stop and you try again to press down right up to the point where that would happen and just hold it there. And every day you're going to try to be able to press a little bit more and a little bit more until one day you will be able, no matter how hard you press, and I'm pressing very hard right now, you will be able to hold down the string with as much pressure as you want and maintain that shape. And maintaining this broad shape is very important for another reason that I talked about within this category of things that are going to help your fourth finger technique, and that is the flexibility of the fourth finger. The fourth finger, above all of the other fingers, needs to be able to change the shape and also the point of the finger that is making contact with the string. Once you're pretty good at being able to press down the fourth finger and hold this position and shape, then one of the next things you can do, and this is really great for developing fourth finger strength, is to just play scales up and down every string, especially the G string, using only the fourth finger. So you can go... Now, obviously, that wouldn't be the best way to actually perform or play a G major scale generally, even if you're doing it all the way up the G string, but it's a great way to practice the flexibility and the strength of your fourth finger. And the maintenance of this shape, no matter how hard you're pressing down the string, is so important for fourth finger technique because above all of the other fingers, the fourth finger needs to have greater flexibility and versatility in playing. For example, just to play a basic arpeggio. You have to have flexibility of the fourth finger that allows you to keep the other two fingers up here within their given position and not be disturbed when the fourth finger stretches a fourth to hit the final note. Every other finger within the arpeggio fits within its given position except for this final note, and this is very common, especially in more advanced music, where the rest of the hand will be staying within a given position, and then the fourth finger has to make a stretch without disturbing the position of the rest of the hand. Another thing that is going to greatly help your fourth finger technique is to make sure that you have found the correct thumb and hand position for your hand. Aside from its size and strength, something that makes the fourth finger so much more difficult to use than the other fingers is, well, first off, it's so much further away from the thumb, which means it's further away from the point of leveraging the fingers against the strings. And also, in the typical violin hand position, it is so much further away from the fingerboard. If you are a non-childhood beginner, and especially if you have particularly small hands, finding the correct thumb and hand position and angle is going to be particularly important for having good fourth finger technique. And it's going to take a considerable amount of experimentation, hopefully guided to you by your teacher. With some of the students I've had with small hands, we've experimented a lot with having the thumb under, having the thumb to the side. Some people even like to have the higher thumb position, which I made a video on. Whatever works for you, you're going to have to maybe spend the first year kind of messing around. And you don't want to mess around as much in the pieces you're playing. I like to use, as many of you who watch this channel will know, the Sevcik Opus 1 exercises that just give a really good chance to practice all of these different things, and then you just play repertoire however you want to play repertoire. But you're going to have to find the angle that puts the hand at the most advantageous position. As I said before, and this is why I like to strengthen the fourth finger in the broad curve, you tend to have a bigger gap here. Now, that gap can be closed, right? So if you notice, if I don't have my wrist out so much, I can actually bring the fourth finger a little closer to the string. Now, for me, that kind of hurts the flexibility and facility of these fingers, so I don't like to do it. But for some people, this works very, very well. And something I've noticed, and this is something you can try when somebody is doing the first set of Sevcik exercises in the one that has the fourth finger. So what will happen is they will actually move their hand, pivot to get to the fourth finger. Now, that is fine so long as you use that as a way to find where your hand position should be. If you have to move your hand to get to your fourth finger, that is where your hand should be. It shouldn't be back here. It should be here. Now, the rest of the time should be trying to maintain this position of your hand while you're putting the other fingers down. So if you have to do this, then keep your hand in this position. As you're practicing the exercise. You do that for a long enough time. Most of my students at least spend half a year to a year doing those first Sevcik exercises. Then eventually you're going to find the place and your hand will just stay there, and you'll increase your flexibility, find the correct hand and thumb position, and you will have no more problems with the basic technique of the fourth finger. But you're kind of going to have to go through that, especially if you're a beginner, for about 6 months to a year. The fifth and final thing that is going to help your fourth finger technique is just start using your fourth finger more. Many teachers used to tell me, well, you think that you don't use your fourth finger because it's weak, but in reality, your fourth finger is weak because you don't use it. Now, that's not 100% true, but there is a lot of truth in there. As I said at the beginning of this video, it's often not just strength that affects your fourth finger technique, but fear, but apprehension about the fourth finger itself. So one of the ways that you're going to get over that the quickest is just by exposure therapy, by forcing yourself to use your fourth finger more often. For instance, instead of playing something like this, you could try playing it like this. Even if in the end you decide you would prefer to land on the third finger at the top of that arpeggio, forcing yourself to practice the fourth finger a little bit more is going to lead to a lot more security and strength, and also, again, versatility and usability of the fourth finger, which is going to be an overall boon to your playing. Anyway, this is a video that I've been wanting to make for a while because I happen to know that no matter how good a violinist you are, you've definitely struggled with your fourth finger technique. I know professional violinists that to this day don't like using their fourth finger very much. So these are things that I found really helped me with my fourth finger and improving that, and also have really helped my students. I want you all to have the most excellent fourth fingers because, as we all know, there is no pleasure in mediocrity. I've been Tobiah Murphy for Murphy Music Academy. Happy practicing, and I'll see you next time.